Welcome to our video on the book of Exodus. This book is an essential part of the Bible, telling the story of how God redeemed the Israelites from slavery in Egypt and led them to the Promised Land. The book is filled with powerful themes of faith, redemption, and obedience, and it remains relevant and inspiring to this day. Major events and important names in the book of Exodus. The Israelite slavery in Egypt is a critical part of the book of Exodus. According to the Bible, the Israelites had migrated to Egypt during a time of famine in their homeland of Canaan. However, over time, the Israelites were enslaved by the Egyptians and forced to work as laborers. Their situation was dire, and they were subjected to cruel treatment by their Egyptian captors. The Israelites cried out to God for help, and God heard their cries. He chose Moses to be the leader who would guide the Israelites out of slavery and to the Promised Land. The Israelites' enslavement in Egypt lasted for over 400 years, and it was a time of great suffering for the Israelites. They were forced to work long hours and were treated as property rather than as human beings. Despite their difficult circumstances, the Israelites held on to their faith in God and their hope for a better future. Their situation finally reached a breaking point, and they cried out to God for help. This was the beginning of the events that would lead to their redemption and freedom from slavery. The Israelites' story is a powerful reminder of the importance of faith and hope, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. The calling of Moses is a pivotal moment in the book of Exodus. According to the Bible, God chose Moses, a Hebrew who was raised as an Egyptian, to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. Moses was initially hesitant to accept this mission from God. He did not believe that he was qualified for the task, and he was unsure of his ability to lead the Israelites. However, God reassured Moses and promised to be with him every step of the way. Eventually, Moses accepted God's call, and he set out to free his people. He confronted Pharaoh and demanded that he let the Israelites go. When Pharaoh refused, God sent a series of plagues to afflict the Egyptians. These plagues included turning the Nile River to blood, sending swarms of frogs, and causing darkness to fall over the land. Despite these signs, Pharaoh remained stubborn and refused to release the Israelites. Finally, God sent one last and devastating plague, the death of the firstborn son of every Egyptian family. This was the final straw for Pharaoh, and he finally agreed to let the Israelites go. Moses then led the Israelites out of Egypt, with God guiding them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. However, the road to freedom was not easy. They faced many challenges and obstacles, including hunger, thirst, and attacks from their enemies. Yet, with God's help and Moses' leadership, they were able to overcome these challenges and make their way to the Promised Land. The calling of Moses is a powerful story of God's faithfulness and the courage of a reluctant leader who stepped up to do what was right. It is a reminder that God can use anyone, regardless of their background or qualifications, to do great things for his people. The plagues of Egypt are a significant part of the story of the book of Exodus. According to the Bible, to convince Pharaoh to let the Israelites go, God sent 10 plagues upon Egypt, each more severe than the last. These plagues were intended to demonstrate God's power and convince Pharaoh to release the Israelites from slavery. The first plague was the Nile River turning to blood. This was a significant blow to the Egyptians, as the Nile was a vital source of water for their crops and livestock. The second plague was a swarm of frogs that covered the land and even invaded the homes of the Egyptians. The third plague was lice, followed by a plague of flies. The fifth plague was the death of livestock, which was a significant economic loss for the Egyptians. The sixth plague was boils that afflicted both people and animals. The seventh plague was hail that destroyed crops and homes. The eighth plague was locusts that ate what little remained of the crops. The ninth plague was a thick darkness that covered the land for 3 days, during which time the Egyptians were unable to see or move about. Finally, the 10th and most devastating plague was the death of the firstborn. This included the firstborn of both people and animals. Pharaoh's own son was among the victims of this plague, which was the final straw that convinced him to let the Israelites go. After this, the Israelites were finally released from slavery and were able to begin their journey towards the Promised Land. The plagues of Egypt demonstrate God's power and his determination to free his people from slavery. They also serve as a warning against the consequences of stubbornness and pride, as Pharaoh's refusal to release the Israelites brought great suffering upon his people. The Passover is a significant event in the book of Exodus that commemorates the Israelites' escape from slavery in Egypt. To protect the Israelites from the final plague, God instructed them to sacrifice a lamb and mark their doorposts with its blood. The angel of death passed over the Israelites, sparing them from the plague. God instructed Moses to tell the Israelites to choose a year-old lamb or goat without any defects and slaughter it at twilight on the 14th day of the month. They were to take some of the lamb's blood and put it on the top and sides of the doorframe of their houses. The lamb was then roasted and eaten with bitter herbs and unleavened bread. That night, the angel of death passed over Egypt and struck down the firstborn of every household, including Pharaoh's son. However, the Israelites were spared because they had followed God's instructions and marked their doorposts with the lamb's blood. The Passover has significant symbolism, as the lamb represented the sacrifice that Jesus would make to save humanity from sin. The unleavened bread represents the haste in which the Israelites left Egypt, as they did not have time to let their bread rise. The bitter herbs represent the bitterness of slavery in Egypt. The Passover is still celebrated by Jews today as a reminder of their deliverance from slavery and their journey to the Promised Land. It is a time of remembrance, reflection, and gratitude for God's deliverance. After the Passover, the Israelites left Egypt and headed towards the Promised Land. However, Pharaoh changed his mind and pursued them with his army. As the Israelites fled, they came to the Red Sea, which blocked their path and made it seem impossible for them to escape. But God performed a miracle and parted the Red Sea, creating a path for the Israelites to cross on dry land. Moses lifted his staff, and the sea parted, with walls of water on either side. The Israelites were able to walk through the sea on dry ground, with the waters forming a wall on either side. As the Israelites passed through the Red Sea, the Egyptian army followed behind them. But when the last Israelite had made it safely to the other side, the waters came crashing back down on the Egyptian army, destroying Pharaoh's chariots and horses, and drowning his soldiers. The parting of the Red Sea was a pivotal event in the book of Exodus, symbolizing God's power and protection over his people. It was a miraculous and unforgettable moment that demonstrated the Israelites' faith in God and his ability to deliver them from their enemies. The parting of the Red Sea has been an enduring symbol of hope for many people, representing the idea that with faith in God's help, seemingly impossible obstacles can be overcome. It is a reminder that God is always with us and that He can work miracles in our lives, no matter how impossible the situation may seem. After the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, they entered the wilderness and began their journey towards the Promised Land. Along the way, they encountered various challenges, including hunger and thirst. God provided for them by giving them manna to eat and water from a rock. Eventually, the Israelites arrived at Mount Sinai, where Moses received the 10 Commandments from God. The 10 Commandments are a set of moral and religious laws that form the foundation of Jewish and Christian ethics. The 10 Commandments are as follows. 1. You shall have no other gods before me. 2. You shall not make for yourself an idol or worship any other gods. 3. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. 4. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 5. Honor your father and mother. 6. You shall not murder. 7. You shall not commit adultery. 8. You shall not steal. 9. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. 10. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, wife, or possessions. The 10 Commandments are considered to be a central part of both Jewish and Christian theology, and they have had a significant impact on the moral and ethical codes of Western society. They are a reminder of God's expectations for His people and serve as a guide for living a righteous and moral life. In addition to the 10 Commandments, God also gave Moses various other laws and instructions, including guidelines for worship, offerings, and social justice. These laws and instructions are recorded in the book of Exodus and serve as a blueprint for how God's people are to live their lives in accordance with His will. The book of Exodus is a story of faith, redemption, and obedience that has inspired millions of people around the world for thousands of years. Its themes of struggle, perseverance, and the triumph of good over evil are as relevant today as they were when the book was written. We hope this video has given you a deeper appreciation for the importance of the book of Exodus and its enduring message of hope and redemption. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and comment to join our amazing community and be part of the conversation.